What is good, my friends? I hope you all are having a good day. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a response to a young lady named Alyssa. She has a channel called Final Facts with Alyssa. And so I actually want to dedicate this video to another special young lady, a kind, strong, and awesome fellow pro-life warrior. But above all else, she's a beloved sister in Christ. And in responding to this pro-choicer in this video, she reminded me of the other young lady, the literal antithesis to the pro-choicer in this video. She's like her polar opposite in every way in her personality. And so if you're watching this, Haley, this video is for you. I pray that the Lord is blessing you and keeping you in all you do in your life. So guys, I found this lady on a well-known conservative YouTuber, Hunter Avalon's channel. They had a discussion about a variety of topics, from the border wall to intersectionality to LGBTQ advocacy, so on and so forth. She has some interesting views, to say the least, so I've subbed to her channel. As you all know, my main interest is the topic of abortion, and I found this video she did in response to Trump's State of the Union address recently. There's a lot of things to address in her video, so let's jump right in.
So I want to start out by talking about the law that passed in New York, because as we know, that was discussed in the State of the Union, and it's been kind of in the news for the last little bit here, and everybody's been talking about it. So I want you guys to know, before I even get started, that for these sources, and again, you guys know all of my sources, I'm going to put all the links in the description. So if you're not sure about something I'm talking about, if you don't want to take my word for it, please fact check me, do your research. I don't mind. It's all right there. So I want you guys to know that for these sources to talk about the New York law, I actually picked one from a pro-life leaning organization or network. I picked one from a pro-choice side, and then I picked one from a neutral fact checker. So I got a little bit of everything, you guys. And the crazy thing is that all sources, and surely a ton of sources that you guys can find in your own time, they actually explain an identical understanding of what has been passed in New York. So let's go over that. I'm going to just break it down into a couple little parts.
Notice, my friends, she starts out here by stressing a bit about fact-checking her. This will be something quite interesting to factor into her arguments as you continue watching.
Okay, so part one. Part one of this law removes abortion from the criminal code by getting rid of terminology that could be interpreted in such a way that limits the right to abortion. So essentially, all this really does is it gets rid of any of the confusing or overcomplicated terminology that was in place that would make it more difficult for a woman to make this decision that should be between her and her doctor. That's all it should be between, and a lot of times they have to go out of their way to fight for XYZ and to be able to have this abortion because of whatever the law, because of just the way that the law is written. People can try to find loopholes in that. So basically what New York did is they just got rid of that. So again, makes it easier for the doctor and the woman to make this personal decision.
What she's not telling you is that what she called loopholes were actually provisions to receive justice in cases like domestic assault, which resulted in the death of their unborn child. In New York's old penal code of the following sections, it states 125.40, abortion in the second degree. A person is guilty of abortion in the second degree when he commits an abortional act upon a female, unless such abortional act is justifiable pursuant to subdivision 3 of section 125.05. Abortion in the second degree is a class E felony. And 125.45. Abortion in the first degree. A person is guilty of abortion in the first degree when he commits upon a female pregnant for more than 24 weeks an abortional act which causes the miscarriage of such female, unless such abortional act is justifiable pursuant to subdivision 3 of section 125.05. Abortion in the first degree is a class D felony. Now, these were the old laws. These laws made it possible for women to receive not only justice done to themselves, but also justice for the loss of their children. And as such, these provisions made it possible for women to receive justice for the loss of wanted children and wanted pregnancies. Under New York's Reproductive Act, or RHA, Reproductive Health Act, RHA, those provisions were repealed. Of course, Alyssa and most other pro-aborts would likely respond by saying that pro-lifers were using such provisions as a backdoor means to introduce pro-life legislation and or such provisions being interpreted in such a way to make abortion more difficult, which it seems Alyssa was just touching on. If she ever sees this in response to this video, she can confirm or disconfirm if my interpretation of her words are accurate. But don't get me wrong, I'm not going to pretend pro-lifers weren't using this form of construction of New York's penal code to undermine the current abortion law at that time. However, I'd argue that's not the fault of pro-lifers, but of the pro-aborts. Although I admit I don't currently have proof to back this up, I think there is at least some evidence to back the plausibility of this view. It seems quite evident to me that the original construction of the penal code was meant to argue in favor for women's choice from a pro-choice perspective, not argue against it. It doesn't appear to make sense to me any other way. The reason I believe this is because if pro-aborts are going to talk about women having the right to do what they wish with their bodies and pregnancies, then if that choice is taken from them, there should be penalties for when that occurs. For instance, under the old penal code, not only were there penalties for assault or murder of pregnant women, there were also penalties for such attacks resulting in the death of their unborn children as well. This was also true in states outside of New York. Scott Peterson is quite a notable case in California back in 2004. He was convicted of 2 murders due to the killing of his pregnant wife, which in turn also led to the death of their unborn son. Even the longtime pro-abortion feminist liberal attorney and women's rights activist Gloria Allred said, when someone other than the woman or her doctor decides to terminate a woman's pregnancy without her consent by force or by violence, I did not think it should be classified as murder. And so, if pro-aborts like Alyssa want to make the case that justice should not have anything to do with the child being taken from the mother and classified simply as a non-factor by wiping away the penal code criminalizing such acts, then they are inevitably for making the case that the loss of her choice is only relevant, not the loss of her child. There is no separate criminal charge for the loss of her unborn child, therefore no justice can be had for the child. Pro-aborts can only try to get around this by arguing that her choice being taken is the issue, not any potential acknowledgement of the unborn being a child. Trying to get around it by arguing only her choice was taken and not a child makes it impossible for any women to get justice for the loss of their child.
Okay, second part. This law guarantees the right to abortion in the first 24 weeks of pregnancy. So again, nothing too different from Roe v. Wade. This is pretty much the exact same thing that's guaranteed with our constitutional reproductive rights. Now, the key piece within this here is that it includes protections if for some reason Roe versus Wade were to get rolled back, that basically New York would be protected. So if on a national scale, abortion was to become illegal, basically the law that New York has put into place would protect it specifically in New York, which is a very tangible thing for New York to do right now, considering the fact that Trump has packed the Supreme Court with pro-life justices and people who want to go by their personal religious leanings and not protect our Constitution.
Like many people on the left, pro-aborts like her only appeal to the Constitution when it suits them and throws it out like garbage when it inconveniences their position. First of all, quite a concise case can be easily made that the passing of abortion on demand in Roe v. Wade literally had little to no constitutional basis, or at least admit that it was a horrible decision. There's a source in the description by multiple liberal minds with a legal background admitting to the either baseless foundation for Roe or at least admitting the horrible basis for its decision. And second, in a recent debate with popular conservative YouTuber Hunter Avalon, she basically argued that Nazis do not have a right to free speech. Don't believe me? Here's the clip.
Listen, when it comes to the synagogue shooting, it was an absolutely awful thing, but taking away people's freedom of speech is not going to stop those things from happening. You are trying to take away people's free speech.
All right,
I'm just trying to make Nazis bad again. That's all. I can't really.
Nazis.
This is controversial.
All right. It's not controversial that Nazis are bad. Everyone agrees that Nazis are bad.
But
It's what we should.
Their freedom of speech.
Yes, I am defending their freedom of speech, just like I defend your freedom of speech, Alyssa.
Okay,
I
I
don't agree.
will defend yours, but I will not defend Nazis' freedom of speech. God, I
Okay.
can't that's great.
Okay.
If you're a snowflake leftist watching this video, try not to confuse the fact about protecting free speech with an endorsement of someone's personal views. Those are not the same thing. Free speech is no longer free speech when it is a call to action, but that in no way can be confused with the mere utterance of hateful things. I'm simply exposing her hypocrisy that one cannot arbitrarily pick and choose when the Constitution is relevant and when it isn't.
So for New York to do this seems pretty reasonable to me because, for the first time in a while, we're kind of in a spot where it's a little scary. Like there's some things in power that could roll these things back. So again, very, very reasonable thing for New York to do.
She seems to recognize that the potential repealing of Roe v. Wade will not stop statewide access to abortion. If that's her position, then I can at least give her credit for that, seeing as a lot of pro-aborts out there have the unfounded hysteria that getting rid of Roe means getting rid of abortion, period.
Now, part 3, I'm going to legit take this straight from that pro-life source I was telling you about. So abortion is allowed without any restrictions during the first and second trimesters. Again, that's how it's always been, Roe v. Wade. Later than that, the question is how fetal viability and protection of the life and health of the mother are determined. The RHA, this law says that those judgments are to be made according to the practitioner's reasonable and good faith professional judgment based on the facts of the patient's case. So again, this isn't just anyone performing an abortion for any reason. It's a medical professional performing an abortion after he's known all the facts of the case, and the woman has made this very personal and very complicated and one of the hardest decisions that a woman will have to make in her life if she's faced with this.
This is really sloppy of her to overlook the most crucial part of that reading. It said life and health of the mother. Health being the key word here. In the RHA bill, health is defined nowhere in it. It is left undefined and vague on purpose. There are already videos out there to support the evidence that a woman's self-proclaimed emotional state can be included under the guise of health, which I'll link in the description. In other words, if she doesn't feel like being pregnant anymore, the abortionist can very well categorize her personal feelings about it under the pretense of health. And even if she could prove that no abortionist would start terminating pregnancies solely because women didn't want to be pregnant after 24 weeks, she still couldn't prove the law necessarily forbids such a thing occurring. No language in the law forbids an abortionist to use his or her position to arbitrarily deem a woman's personal feelings under the guise of health. The fact that something is legally allowed and generally not abused doesn't mean it's a good law. For instance, suppose there's a place to where there is no legal penalty for not wearing a seatbelt while driving. Let's say the vast majority of the people there wear their seatbelt anyway because of simple common sense in the interest of safety to themselves and others. Just because most people don't abuse the legal permission of such doesn't mean it necessarily follows there should be no law requiring seatbelts to be worn. And so, even if she could prove no abortion providers would abuse the legal permission of abortionists to make their assessment on the health of women, that still doesn't in and of itself demonstrate that legal permission is justified as being the law.
And let me also throw out my first final fact PSA, and that's that only 1.3% of abortions occur after 21 weeks. So again, really what this law pushed for, it's only 1.3% of abortions that are occurring after 21 weeks anyway, you guys, so it's barely any to begin with.
Here's a usual pro-abort talking point, simply saying how low the numbers are after 21 weeks. First of all, so what? That doesn't mean anything. If the numbers were around 2%, all of a sudden an issue to her, 3%, 5%, 10%, 50%? What is the demarcation threshold line which states this percentage now is too much, if there even is such a thing as too much to begin with? Sounds like such a line is arbitrarily drawn if one even exists at all. And second, let's take her number of abortions occurring after 21 weeks, 1.3%. Let's just round that down to 1%. If we take a conservative number of abortions per year on average in the United States, let's say 600,000, that's 6,000 abortions after 21 weeks per year. That may sound like a small number in comparison to the women who don't, but 6,000 women is more than enough to take up a sizable section at your typical sports arena. Given the passing of New York's abortion law, it's not implausible to say a good number of the 6,000 figure would travel to New York to get an abortion. Business would be booming in New York with just that conservative figure alone. And before any pro-abort wants to claim the vast majority of abortions at that period are happening because the mother's life is in danger or fetal anomaly, that is patently false. I have a link in the description to debunk that nonsense.
Now, part 4, this is where I could see, there could be some justification in the concern from the right, but again, it's because they don't know the whole story, and I'm going to break it down for you guys. They don't know all the facts. So while it's true that the law does allow for non-physicians to perform abortions, the law still specifies that a healthcare practitioner must be licensed, certified, or authorized under New York's medical licensing laws in order to carry out the procedure. So no, not anyone in the doctor's office can do this. No, not somebody down the street can do this. Not whoever can perform an abortion. The person who's performing this procedure still has to be authorized, certified, or licensed, you guys. So again, there's really nothing different here except making this more accessible for women when it's already, there's already so many obstacles in the way. Again, with the terminology and now with who's allowed to perform it, this just kind of opens it up so that way it's more accessible for the women who need to make this choice.
My issue isn't so much who gets to do the abortions, as much as it's why they have to widen up the practitioners who can perform them just to facilitate widespread access in the first place. It's because so many people are leaving the abortion industry that they are running short on the proper individuals willing to engage in that evil to begin with. I'm not necessarily claiming that's true or false. Just food for thought, something to chew on.
So moving on, we're now going to basically do a little history lesson on Roe v. Wade. And I also want to teach you guys a little bit about what the definition of viability is and how we came to get to this definition. And again, if you guys don't believe me, if you don't want to take me for my word, all of this is fact checked. All my receipts and links are in the description. Feel free to take some time yourself and check them out. Whatever you guys want to do. I've gathered all these sources because I actually was asked to write a pro-choice piece for an upcoming nonpartisan media agency. So once that piece is published, I'll be putting that in here as well as like a link, because that was me pretty much writing on this, something I'm passionate about and something I've researched vigorously. So trust me when I say you can take my word for it and my research for it. So point one, medical professionals, court justices, scholars who have literally spent their lifetimes studying this matter all agree that no one has the knowledge or understanding to pinpoint where life begins.
Okay, that's just either a straight up lie she said or a high level of ignorance. For those of you which have been following my channel for a while, y'all know I've debunked this claim so many times. There's a link in the description making it very clear science has indeed confirmed life begins at conception. This is not up for debate at all. Tons of human embryology texts confirm this. Again, either she's lying to her audience or she's severely ignorant of the facts. And so, the commencement of her history lesson, ironically itself, is starting off as historically inaccurate. After all, it was her who wanted to be fact-checked anyways.
So if these people who have spent their lifetimes, if these medical professionals who have their doctorates in this topic, in this subject, if they say this is what it is, I don't know why any of you guys who have not studied this, do not have your doctorate, who have nowhere near the wherewithal that these people do, I don't know why you guys think you know any better just because you have some religious standpoint.
What she just said is flat out just stupid. Before anybody twists this, I simply mean her logic here is stupid. She's displaying stupidity, not saying that she is stupid. Just had to put that out there before anyone got it twisted. First of all, it's not impossible for people with degrees to get stuff wrong. Second, not all people with degrees say what she just said anyway, especially given the one source which debunks her entirely. And third and lastly, her comment is even more stupid when she claims the objection to her nonsense is only predicated upon some religious standpoint. Now, as a presuppositional Bible-believing Christian, I argue that religious neutrality is a myth. That means all persons, including pro-lifers and pro-aborts, cannot ultimately avoid arguing on a religious metaphysical grounding. but that's for another possible video in the future. However, even if she wants to reject what I just said, she definitely cannot reject that there are even atheists out there making a case against the pro-abortion view. Those atheists, from her point of view, must be quite religious too, right? Her objection is absurd. In fact, I'd argue that simply dismissing the objections to your position in an arbitrary ad hoc fashion is arguing no differently than an irrational religious person. She's acting like the very person she claims she isn't. My friends, let's give her a moment of silence for her stupidity. Thank you so much. And now we return to our regularly scheduled programming.
2. Instead, after decades of research and testing, the consensus still remains that life is measured through the idea of viability.
That's yet another falsehood she just told. The first link in her description from PubMed actually says nothing about when life begins at all. It's merely a paper outlining research to address the issue on how babies born prematurely around roughly 21 to 22 weeks, give or take, are to be addressed in terms of medical care. It only mentions abortion twice in the peer-reviewed study, but none of those times did the study actually argue for or against abortion. Abortion was merely mentioned in relation to implications regarding viability that people debate about based on the study. Life is a necessary element to even discuss survivability. An entity which has no life cannot be put into a context about survival. A human survives or does not survive. A rocket doesn't. That point alone blows up her nonsense about when life begins being an issue of viability. Her second link was basically the same thing. And her third link was just about abortion in the United States, so I don't really know what the heck her point was with that. My friends, do you remember when I said in the beginning that with the sources she posted, her assessment of the information wasn't necessarily accurate? This here is exactly what I was talking about. She really should be embarrassed.
3. Viability determines the capability of living. So essentially, for a fetus to be viable, it must be able to survive outside the womb. So whenever you hear the word non-viable, that is referring to a fetus that will not be able to survive outside the womb.
I find it very interesting. Pro-abortionists like her constantly give this argument about fetuses having to survive outside the womb, yet they are the ones who say that pre-viability, only the fact that the mother's biological resources can sustain the child, means exclusively that she has a right to kill the kid. Viability at its core is merely a measurement of the current era of medical technology. By her argument, if medical technology improves to allow newborn babies to survive at earlier gestational periods if born prematurely, then how come the argument to justify abortion goes away when someone else's resources are keeping the baby alive? When her resources are keeping the baby alive, she can have her child killed. When someone else's resources in the medical field is keeping the baby alive, now all of a sudden it's about viability. It's like pro-abortionists are playing a very deceptive and dishonest game here of moving the goalposts, because the question shifts back and forth from the capability to survive to the means used to keep the baby alive. In a sense, frozen embryos are viable outside the womb because they can be kept alive under the proper frozen conditions. They are merely surviving in a different way. Are we to believe that she thinks it's wrong to destroy embryos being kept alive outside the womb through frozen means, suggest keeping them should be illegal? Of course not. There's likely no way she'd buy that argument because it has zero to do with the ability to survive outside the womb. It's just a dishonest argument of arbitrarily picking specific conditions in which to justify her love of murder to unborn children.
4. Roe v. Wade has always marked viability, beginning around 24 weeks, give or take, and there are numerous studies to confirm or back up this ruling. There's been tons of studies, you guys, to prove when viability starts, at what week. One of the ones I included in here is actually a study that looked at viability from 20 to 26 weeks, and it was over like 10 or 15 years period of time. Like, this was a legitimately deep and involved study, and it found time and time again, as with the other studies I've included as in the link in the description, that this viability starts at 23 weeks. Around 23 weeks is where it's at. So again, Roe v. Wade is pretty much right in there. That's where it's at. That's science, you guys. That's not, feelings. That's fact.
Her whole nonsense about viability as a justification has been thoroughly refuted, as it's been shown to have been based on the very thing she claims to be against basing it on: feelings.
So this is not reminder for you guys. The people who back up Roe v. Wade, the people who have defended our reproductive right to choice, these are not just uninformed politicians making decisions. These are court justices making decisions based on decades of research, based again on medical professionals, and based on the facts. The only people in the court, the only people sitting with power right now that make decisions not based on the Constitution and based on religious morality or whatever, that's Republicans. That's what you're doing right now, because your only argument against abortion is the religious high ground. That's it. And the pro-choice is the Constitution high ground. That's it. And you guys always say you want to defend the Constitution, but I guess not now.
My friends, it's not unusual for pro-aborts to repeat the same usual propaganda talking points over and over again. And do y'all know what else is not unusual?
It's not unusual to be lonely. It's not unusual to have fun with anyone.
She just continues to crash and burn, repeating the propaganda, pro-abortion rhetoric and nonsense, repeating crap like you must be some religious, anti-constitutional moron to object to Roe v. Wade. Although we've already shown that her point there is just shot to hell, she's going full leftist SJW mode at this point.
So for you Christian Republicans, the ones we were just talking about, pro-lifers, I want to give you guys a list of ways that you guys can actually create a decrease in abortion rates. I'm going to post this up. Read along with me. I found this the other day and I really liked it. It really spoke to me. So here we go. Ways to decrease abortion rates in America. Fight for access to affordable, available birth control options. Support science-based, thorough sex ed. Yeah, because in case you guys didn't know, America, modernized America, we don't have any nationally mandated sexual education courses. There's nothing like that, which pretty much explains why the Bible Belt has some of the highest rates of teen and unwed pregnancies, because that's what happens when you teach abstinence and not reality.
So this is where we get into debunking her list, my friends. So, number one, birth control is available just about anywhere on the cheap, including her beloved Planned Parenthood. You can even sometimes get it in the machines, so that's not even remotely an argument. 2. This sex ed argument is so old and ridiculous. If you really think that Christians are not doing much to help, if to even worse, attempting to hinder sex ed, then how is that everybody knows about the option available to get abortions, but somehow magically little to nobody knows nothing about proper sex education here in 2019? If Christians really had that kind of power to limit education to that scale, don't you think they would have limited the spread of information regarding abortion access too? How does not helping in one case limit sex ed access, but not helping in the other doesn't limit access to abortion information?
Back to the list, sorry. Adopt or foster. Treat mothers and post-abortion women with the same love you have for their babies. Destigmatize being an unwed mother. You can't create a culture where these women are judged and shamed and then expect them not to look for a way out. Hold men accountable. Fight for a livable wage, for affordable housing, for a better foster care system, for decent parental leave, for available affordable health care. And again, maintain your credibility by caring for the life beyond the womb. This includes refugees, immigrants, orphans, addicts, the poor, minorities, LGBTQ+, etc.
Okay, my friends, we're going to systematically break this down. Number 3, as far as adopting and fostering is concerned, where are the plethora of pro-abortion parents involved in fostering and adoption? The vast majority of adoption agencies you can search for on the internet are generally Christian and pro-life related entities, not liberal ones. Number 4, the fact that you even seem to think that post-abortive women aren't treated with the same love as their babies tells me you don't know a thing about the pro-life movement. It appears you might have possibly taken some isolated cases of extremists and painted pro-lifers with a broad brush. 5, So first you say there's no national sex ed thing. Then you say that those in the Bible Belt has the highest rates of teen/unwed pregnancy. Then what education does the non-Bible Belt territories have for their pregnancy rates to be lower, if it isn't based in abstinence education? Could that education be the sex ed you were talking about? If so, then you just refuted yourself. If not, then what is keeping the non-Bible Belt regions lower in pregnancy rates if it has little to nothing to do with sex ed? Are the pregnancy rates still too high for your taste on a national level to bring up such a complaint in the first place? If that's the case, then whatever is the education in the non-Bible Belt areas apparently isn't effective enough either. Otherwise, you wouldn't have brought it up from the start. Number 6. If you believe women are so strong that you're such a feminist, then I like to think you would not think women require anyone else's opinion to destigmatize anything. If women are so strong, with or without men, with or without the approval of others' opinions, then why do they all of a sudden lack strength and look for a way out when people say mean things about them? Doesn't seem to me you think very highly of the strength of women at all. Number 7. As far as accountability goes, that's a two-way street. Men should be held accountable for being deadbeats, and women and the men helping them should be held accountable for getting abortions done. Number 8. As far as livable wages and housing, you want to talk about choice all day with women and how they should be empowered to make that choice, yet somehow their empowerment disappears when it comes to making their own way to make a livable wage and getting housing. Interesting how all over the scale Alyssa gets when it comes to what women are capable of or not capable of without other people. Number 9. In regards to the foster care system, I agree improvements have to be made. However, all I hear is pro-aborts complaining about the system, but offering zero solutions. Apparently, pro-aborts don't give a crap about born people if they support legalized killing of children in the womb. They could just be lazy and leave it to those heartless pro-lifers to figure everything out, right? And 10, for parental leave and affordable health care, I repeat the same point I did in number 8. Women are so capable and free to get abortions on their own, but when it comes to doing anything else, they need the whole world to support them? What happened to that feminine strength?
And I feel the need to bring this up because it was something that I brought up and I wrote about in that pro-choice piece that that is going to get published that I was talking about earlier. And that's the fact that I just find it so illogical that we place the burden of pregnancy completely on the woman, that we place the burden of pregnancy, sex, all of that on the woman, and really nothing on the man. Because if you guys really, again, look at science, look at the medical facts, a man is producing sperm almost his entire life. Like, he's ready to go constantly. A woman, we have a finite number of eggs. That's it. It's just that number of eggs, and then we're done. That's it. Now, a man, again, theoretically, he can get a woman pregnant every single day. I mean, technically, you guys, a man could get multiple women pregnant every single day for a whole year. Now, a woman, on the other hand, we can get pregnant once, twice, 2 times max in a year. If you did back to back, you could do it. That's it. So why is it all on us? Why are we the ones to be responsible for all of this? And at the same time, I this is the joke that I always kind of make, but there is some truth to it. Men, if you are so against abortion, then y'all go get vasectomies. It's that simple. And for those that would quickly be like, oh, what? Us get vasectomies? You want to tell men what to do with their bodies? Guess what? You're literally this close to getting the point.
I just want to reiterate what I stated before. The burden issue is a two-way street. It's not an issue of simply holding women accountable, nor is it an issue of simply holding men accountable. Can we both agree on that? Both have equal accountability. The fact that at times unequal accountability can occur is no excuse for women to kill their children, and at times men participating with them in doing so, any more than it is an excuse for a scumbag father to be a deadbeat and make every woman pregnant he sleeps with. But you seem to think that because at times unfair things like the burden being placed upon women too much can occur, it means it's an excuse to justify women killing their unborn children. Men deal with unfair burdens all the time with the legal system stacked up against them with child support. But does it give it a right for him to run and be a deadbeat? No. Life is unfair whether we like it or not. We don't get to justify morally bad behavior because unfair things happen to us. At the end of the day, the ones paying the biggest price is the children, not the parents. This is why I can't stand about nonsensical pro-abort logic. They frame everything in the context of men's rights versus women's rights and don't give two craps at all about the children. The women can kill them in the womb and the men can abandon them. Both are horrible in their own ways.
Because I can't talk about pro-life, pro-choice, abortion, reproductive rights. I cannot talk about all of that without mentioning this fact. Don't forget, it's the pro-life party that's pushing legislation to restrict LGBTQ plus and non-Christian couples from adoption. So you can't sit here, you can't be Republican and pro-life and sit here and be like, oh, adoption, why don't you just move up for adoption? You ignore the fact that there's a six-figure number already attached to those waiting to be adopted, to those children sitting in foster care right now, and you ignore the fact that you'll scream adoption all day long. Meanwhile, it's literally your party in different states that's pushing legislation to restrict people from adopting just because they're gay or they're not Christian. So no, you guys really don't care.
See, now she's conflating different issues and attempting to blend them into the same context. It's possible to be against killing a child in the womb, yet wanting the best possible circumstances for the child once born. First, she was talking about how much we should care for born children, but when there are Christians who believe children should not be raised by gay parents, she has an issue. Presumably, she has no issue with the Christian thing to do and caring about born children, yet reject the Christian thing to do when it comes to living out being a Christian as a whole. Well, I got news for you, Alyssa. To be a Christian is a package deal. Christians must comport to all of Christianity, not the parts they want to arbitrarily cherry pick and choose. You cannot pick the part about Christians adopting and fostering being a good thing, while at the same time rejecting them continually and consistently holding to their Christian worldview elsewhere, which excludes the condoning of things like homosexual proclivities. The fact that Christians are against abortion does not mean that Christians should just be fine with children being in just any and every kind of conceivable situation of being raised by adults. I'm sure you don't even believe that nonsense, Alyssa. If you talk about a child that's born, you're not going to want that child raised by irresponsible adults. You don't want adopted children just raised by anyone. In the same kind of way, you believe irresponsible adults are not good for a child's development. Christians believe children being raised by gay parents are not good for their development. Who children are raised by and abortion are not in the same context. Now, if you want to talk about that and debate the logistics of that, then that's a side issue. And you cited there is a huge number of kids waiting to be adopted. People who are gay are very small in number to those who are not. Even if all gay couples were to adopt children, that would not even come remotely close to putting a dent in the children waiting to be adopted.
It's kind of weird to me that you guys will really advocate, because you guys do seem to care about child sex trafficking and sex trafficking in general when it comes to the border. You guys are all about like, oh man, we got to fight this at the border. But then you're like, well, if she chooses to have the baby and it gets adopted and ends up in foster care and gets sex trafficked, oh well. I mean, at least she had the baby, right? At least she didn't make the choice, her own choice in her reproductive rights, right?
Yes, because pro-lifers are really sitting around like, oh well, the children caught in sex trafficking. Keep believing your fantasy, Alyssa. Whatever fallacies you argue on to help you sleep better at night. It's so interesting you want to imagine all this conjecture. Imagine the worst things about pro-lifers. Why don't you actually talk to them first instead of assuming things all day?
And before I close out with one more Final Facts PSA, I do want to mention the idea that, clearly, if you're looking at research, if you're looking at medical fact, if you're looking at American history, you have to know that pro-choice is the side. That's the winning side above pro-life. Because since Roe v. Wade was enacted, since the early 1970s, 1973, the pro-life movement has sprung up and has fought. I mean, you guys have seen, we all see it. We know how hard they fought over the last however many decades. And, there's been several times where even in the last 2 years, they fought for the heartbeat bill. They fought for, to just totally outlaw abortion, all of it. And what happens time and time again in the decades of our past and in recent history? Supreme Court justices and court justices in every state, they strike it down over and over again because they know what's medical fact and they know what our constitutional right is, so they know that pro-choice is the way to go. That's it. If you want American freedom, it's pro-choice. It's not pro-life, because pro-life, again, is pushing your religious beliefs on other people, and you guys say you're not for that, at least when we're talking about, Sharia law or whatever. But, again, you guys got to pick and choose and be selective about whatever.
It's really interesting you bring that point up, because now you want to talk about the fact that pro-life keeps getting struck down. Yet you said in the beginning of this video how the RHA Act was needed to stop loopholes to make abortion access more difficult. If the pro-life view keeps getting struck down, then how did personhood laws in the case of homicide get into the penal code law in the first place? The way it works is that pro-lifers have had their victories and the pro-aborts have had their victories. But this idea that the pro-life view keeps getting struck down, therefore it's not truly about freedom and rights, like the pro-abortion side is just dumb. It's just flat out stupid. That's just like saying that because oppressive slavery was once legal and the battle to outlaw it was a long time in the working and it got struck down multiple times, therefore it wasn't winning because it didn't go away overnight. The fight against slavery was a long one and it was eventually won. Pro-lifers are not going to quit because it's been nearly 5 decades. In many instances in history, rights, freedom, and liberty take many generations, blood, sweat, and tears. And so, this argument, like many of our other ones, is just simply beyond terrible. And you have no room to talk about pushing religious beliefs on others when feminism has been deemed by even certain atheists out there to be an extremist cult-like religion itself. Your altar is Planned Parenthood, and you sacrifice your children to your goddess of choice. You believe in women pushing their selfish beliefs on their children to kill them, and you pretend it's about reproductive rights. That's like a parent throwing their newborn into the garbage to disallow their child living in their house, then attempting to claim property rights. My house, my choice. My property, my choice. No matter how you try to justify it in your mind, you will never, and I mean you will never, and you can never give a rational justification for justifying the legal slaughter of unborn children. At least own it and stop attempting to frame it to be anything else but that. You'd have a bit more respect for me if you were at least upfront about it. So that's it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time. Also, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care, God bless, and peace.